Welcome back, everybody. In this session, we're going to be talking about the future of work, the impact of hybrid working on wellbeing and belonging for early career talent. And I'm joined by Alice of DBL and Laura from HSBC. If you were tuned in first this morning, you'll have heard Laura talking already about our development network and our efforts to increase that. But in this session, Laura will be talking about her experiences of HSBC. I think you all know pretty much how this works on this platform now. So Alice and Laura have definitely got some stuff they want you to talk about in the chat as we go through, but also pop your questions in. We've got about 10 minutes at the end where I'll feed those questions back through to Alice and Laura, and we'll answer anything that comes up. So enough from me. Alice and Laura, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephen. So Laura is here. She's just going to join a bit later when she brings to life her experience of looking after early career talent during the pandemic, particularly in the light of wellbeing and belonging. And delighted to be here today with you all, delighted to be connecting with you all, albeit in a very different way from how we were doing a year ago. Already made the observation that we were sort of joking about the amount of hand sanitizer and sort of feeling like we were on the edge of a precipice, but not really knowing what was coming. And I'm kind of glad for all of us that we didn't. Human beings are very bad at predicting how they're going to feel when they experience adversity. And I think if we'd known what the next year had to offer, we might have all been rather more glum a year ago. But it is wonderful to connect, and it's been wonderful to listen to all of the talks and amazing insights over the last day and a bit. And I'm delighted to see that wellbeing and belonging have been such a primary focus coming through from everything from Jamil's keynote yesterday to developing talent talking about psychological safety earlier. Sky and the Smarty Train talking about communities yesterday, and grad consultants, some up doing similar, and obviously the student job coach last night talking about the importance of well-being. So yeah, what we're going to do today is dive into that in some more detail. Very briefly, for anyone who doesn't know, I am Alice Scott. I'm the Chief Behavioural Officer at Development Beyond Learning and Development Beyond Learning Support, and we're experts in early career talent, supporting them in what we know to be one of the most difficult transitions. We were very proud, and for those of you who joined the Lunch and Learn yesterday, you'll have seen Kusha and Paul talk about our partnership with R West, which we were delighted to win Best Partnership, Best Employer and Supplier Partnership for. And the reason I wanted to sort of highlight that is what we are in the business of doing at Development Beyond Learning. Our purpose is to create experiences and change lives. And we do that by underpinning everything that we do with behavioural science and psychology. So we want to make sure that everything we do is evidence-based, so that we not only host great development moments and events and experiences, but that we actually empower people to have the skills and tools to make changes that will improve their lives. And I'm particularly delighted today to be talking about that in the context of wellbeing and belonging, because they are two issues which are hugely important, have always been hugely important, and are particularly more so in our current climate. So what we're going to do today is to talk briefly about what we actually mean by wellbeing and belonging before thinking about its importance. We always focus on why something matters. It's important for people to believe in the value of something in order to change their behaviour. And then we're going to think about the challenge that early career talent have had around wellbeing and belonging over the last year. So I've said pre-COVID, COVID and beyond. I liked Bob's BC, DC and AC analogy or phraseology, slightly better. But we're going to think about how early career talent were coping in relation to wellbeing and belonging before, during, and what a hybrid future might mean for early career talent. And then Laura will be joining me, and we'll start to focus more on what can we do about that. So having understood why it's important and the context, let's get to some really practical recommendations, both from Laura, kind of on the ground in the trenches working with her team, and then we're going to share some of our early research into the best strategies for enhancing early career talent's wellbeing during these days. And we'll finish with some recommendations, and Stephen will come back for Q&A. So please do pop any questions you've got for Laura or myself into the Q&A box. So something that we often do, and one of the greatest pleasures over the last year has been hosting and running training programs for participants, early career talent across our client base. because we've seen how much people value the opportunity to connect, to share insights, to share their experience. And one of the things we found really important is, before we dive into a particular topic, to get everybody actually thinking about what that topic means for them. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is, in the chat box, please share what you think wellbeing means. You're very welcome to share a dictionary definition if you have one, or if you work in wellbeing all the day and you want to be very precise, that's fine. But I'm just as interested in what you might need, what it might mean to you, to your family, to your job. So that's the first thing we're going to ask you to just pop into the chat box, and I will come back to that shortly. So thank you for sharing your perspective on what wellbeing means. While you do that, I am going to just share. I don't often revert to the Oxford Dictionary for definitions, but actually in this case I think it's really quite nice, quite simple. So the definition of well-being, the Oxford Dictionary's definition of well-being, is the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. I think the only thing I might say is perhaps the or should be an and, but I think that's really true. You know, when we're feeling comfortable, healthy, and happy, we're probably feeling like our well-being is quite high. So yeah, I see some, thank you so much, lots coming in, so that's brilliant, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing that we're thinking about today, and again has been a major theme over the last day and a bit, is belonging, and I know that that's become more and more of a focus. I think about the last few ISE conferences in various different locations, never virtual before, and we've moved from talking about D&I to the importance of I before D, to really thinking about the value of belonging. But what do we actually mean by it? So again, if you've managed to share your thoughts on what we mean by well-being, please do tell me now what you think, what belonging means to you, what you think we mean by that. And I've gone to the other university to talk about for a definition, and Cambridge did have a better definition, I thought. Here talks about to feel happy or comfortable in a situation. So there's been lots, you know, psychological safety has been talked about a lot, very well earlier this morning. You know, when people feel happy and comfortable in a situation, that's when they feel that they belong. And it is crucially important, as we'll come on to see, to our sense of well-being. So thank you very much. I'm going to come and start to read out some of your comments in a minute. I certainly won't get to all of them, but I'm going to actually capture them, ask the ISE to capture them all, and we might turn them into I love a Wordle, so see what the ISE community thinks of well-being and belonging in a Wordle, and perhaps be able to share that out. I'll speak nicely to Viv. But what we're going to do now is launch a poll. So you should see, and I can see a blue dot, which tells me it's happened seamlessly. I was just complimenting the ISE on this brilliant platform and how well they're running it, and the tech team, James and his team, so thank you. That a poll has come out, and the reason I want to do this is, one of the things that's been so important is having the moments of connection that we can during these days. And one of the reasons that we found that virtual connections have been so much more valued, so we've seen kind of satisfaction scores that we could only have dreamt of virtually before, largely because people are missing connections, and actually these connections mean so much in this context. So one of the things I think is really important, psychologically safe space, just how are we all feeling? How do we feel our well-being has been impacted? And so you'll see you've got multiple choice selection in your poll there. Have a little go at telling us, so we can see as a group how are we feeling, and then we'll come on to think about our early career talent a little bit more. While you're doing that, I'm just going to look at my second screen and read out some of the comments. So thinking about well-being, we've got balance, proactively considering how to keep yourself energized, healthy and happy, looking after others and yourself. Yeah, I think that's really nice. Jamil talked yesterday about how we tend to feel really good when we're helping others, and there's loads of research about altruism. Actually, one of the reasons that we like being altruistic is it does have a positive impact on us. So look, yeah, being healthy and happy, feeling balanced, so lots about balance, and then starting to see that people make sense that belonging is really important in well-being, healthy mind and body, contentment, etc. So yeah, all really good, feeling good and positive, self-care. And then when we come on to think about belonging, so yeah, able to be yourself, whatever that might be in the moment. So I think this definitions of psychological safety, all about that, bringing your whole self, feeling connected, really important to to belonging, feeling a valuable part of something. Yes, so how much do you actually feel that you are actually part of that? Authentic self, can be myself. So absolutely, all these things, we completely know what it is. We know it when we feel it. We know it when we say it. And it's about feeling that you belong, feeling part of something that you believe in, and yeah, identifying with a team. So thank you so much for all those definitions. And as I say, we'll try and do something with them and to share back as a community. But as a group, as a community now, let's see how we're feeling in terms of wellbeing. So if we could share the results, I think they're coming through now, of the poll. They are fabulous. That's great. Okay, I'm just being told by James in my ear that the results are on the screen. So good. So what we're seeing is that, oh, there's quite a lot larger. James, could you tell me what the top one is again? Because I'm struggling to see it. Okay, it's come through now. So my well-being has gone up and down. Okay, well, that's excellent. I have to say, shows that I wasn't a very good predictor here, that I was expecting to see more in camp 5, having missed the pub and so on and so forth. But that's great. And I suppose actually I should have predicted that, because I think my own experience and everyone that I've spoken to, there are highs and lows. And obviously one of the things that's been so challenging over the last year has been the extent to which we have any certainty of what's coming up, and yes, the various different moments we've had. So as a group, it's gone up and down, and obviously that's something that we can expect to have been impacting our early career talent as well, both those in role and those who will be coming on to join us in the months ahead. So thanks so much for sharing all of that. Now we're going to think a little bit about the value of well-being and belonging. And as I said, we always try to kind of just get our head into, like, why is this important? What's the business case for it? And one of my favorite things about well-being and belonging is the business case, much like for diversity and inclusion, is literally a no-brainer. It's good for business and it's good for individuals. And so essentially these next slides are very much, if you feel that there's any need to expand on the business case within your organisation, the data is there and there in spades. So from a variety of sources that you can see at the bottom, we know that when well-being levels are high within organisations, people's attachment to those organisations go up by 35%. Their motivation, which is obviously hugely correlated with performance, go up by 52%. And then the sorts of measures we want to see go down do. So staff turnover, unwanted attrition goes down by 87%. So when people are feeling a good high level of well-being. Sick days go down by 11%, and stress levels are massively down. So well-being critically important to both personal and commercial success. And what's really important to understand, I'm going to sort of talk predominantly about well-being, but I want everybody to, I'm sure all the talk we've had over the last few days, to really understand that without belonging, it's very, very difficult to feel a sense of well-being. They are hugely correlated. I think this quote by the Mayo Clinic is really sums it up nicely, which is, we cannot separate the importance of a sense of belonging from our physical and mental health. And research, and there's a number of sources here if you want to follow up, but research shows the correlation between well-being and belonging in a variety of communities. So in the wider community studies show that. In education, particularly, lots of research has been done in universities, in amongst unemployed populations. So when people who are unemployed feel a sense of well-being, of belonging, sorry, their well-being is much higher. So one of the biggest risk factors to being unemployed is a lack of belonging, and that impacting your well-being. And it makes sense. I know I've shared this before, but one of the most things I find most amazing about the way that we react to feeling a lack of belonging is that our brain literally processes it in the same way as we feel physical pain. So when we don't feel we belong, our brain kind of feels almost as it would if we were receiving physical pain. So when we think about how closely linked well-being and belonging are, we process feeling physical pain and feeling social pain in the same way. And so it's pretty much no doubt, no surprise that those two are so intrinsically linked. And one thing to sort of mention when we're thinking about running wellbeing programs or strategies within our organisation is research by the CIPD last year found that the best intention, the best funded wellbeing campaigns within organisations tended to fail if the culture was wrong, if there was not a sort of supportive culture of psychological safety and wellbeing and the like. So our culture is really important. And if we look at 7 dimensions of workplace wellbeing, and there's a model called Prowell, which is widely used, it highlights the importance of wellbeing in 3 counts: physical, mental, and social. And again, coming back to belonging, there are studies that show that when we feel we belong, that has positive impact for our cardiovascular health. It has positive impact on boosting our immune system. And new endocrine studies show it has positive impact on our hormones. So it suppresses stress hormones and makes us feel kind of more relaxed. And thus it's unsurprising that we see very similar statistics for studies that look into the impact on individuals and business when we feel we belong. Performance increases by 56%, staff turnover reduces, sick days reduce, and the amount to which employers promote their organisation goes up absolutely enormously. And that's by a study from Better Up last year. For the individual too, they see an increase in the rises and the promotions that they can expect over time. So well-being and belonging, and you'll get these slides, the business case is just as impressive as we've known the business case to be for D&I for some time. So what's been going on with early career talent and well-being? So it's obviously going to be no surprise to any of you that resilience has been a key concern for employers of early career talent for the last 3 years. So the last 3 development studies have shown that resilience is a key concern for employers, being in the top position for the last 2 years. And I think sometimes I've spoken to a number of you about this. We hear less of the student voice, although I've loved this conference that we've seen so many participants coming along and talking about their programs. The student voice supports that pre-COVID, the impact of on wellbeing was very significant. So 80% of those studying in higher education reported symptoms of stress or anxiety. That's as recent as 2019, so just before the pandemic. A little bit further back, research into the percentage of mental health problems and stress, a study by NUS, and 40% of students feeling high anxiety with a high prevalence across all 3 years at university. So as we've known, wellbeing a real issue and helping our students to feel supported, our early career talent to feel supported, very important. I put this up because people often ask me, and we often get into discussions about, is it to do with the reduction in stigma around mental health and issues so people feel they can talk about it more, or is it to do with early career talent generations being very different? So Jonathan Hyde has written a book about the coddling of the American mind. He did a lecture at LSE where he talks about it in the UK context, and the stats very much support that but both are true essentially. So yes, it's easier to talk about it now because of the reduced stigma, and yes, there has been an extent to which younger generations have been protected in a different way for lots of very valid reasons. I think the important thing to sort of focus on is that it's true, and it's likely to be a kind of trend that continues. So the importance of supporting wellbeing will only continue. And the impact of COVID, it'll be no surprise to anyone. I mean, typically there's lots of studies into the impact on wellbeing, on mental health, on the young, and they tend to take the headline as the group that suffered most. So, more than half students said that they consider their mental health to be worse. They've reported greater feelings of loneliness. High proportion believe their future will be worse. High suicidal reports. Lots of things, sort of self-harm and so on, report feeling less able to cope. So it's a very real and very lived experience for students that this period has been difficult. I know we all know that, but it's sort of just kind of recognising it. And I know a number of people have said the importance that we have as employers to really support them, and I know we're doing a great job. I think the important thing to recognise is it's likely to continue in the future. So from Tristram this morning to Bob and team yesterday, there's been lots of comments on the fact it's unlikely that we're going to go back to the way things were. Lots of headlines on that as well, and the research would completely support that. The vast majority of organisations are predicting that we won't go back to the same model, that we will move to a hybrid model. And the vast majority of employees and employers are wanting that as well. So PwC, only a fifth of employers want return to the pre-pandemic office. From BCO, 62% of executives and 58% of entry-level workers do want to split between home and office work, and 77% of employees from a report by Adecco are looking for a hybrid model. Link that with the number of organisations, and there are many, many more coming out and saying that they are going to move to a hybrid model, and it seems to be a sensible bet for the future. Interestingly, generally speaking, the preference is for more remote work rather than less, but we all know that while there are some benefits to remote working, the number of hours Jamil mentioned that have been saved from commuting, I think we can all relate to being a positive. There are some difficulties, and some of them are things like missing colleagues and the social side of work, feeling disconnected from team, fewer opportunities for interesting conversations, experiencing feelings of loneliness and isolation, and then sort of perhaps slightly differently, too many pointless meetings and catch-ups. And one of the things about all of these, and I know we'll all feel this as early career talent practitioners, is these are the sorts of things that are particularly challenging for early career talent. So, you know, last year was how do we onboard them? How do we create the connections? And the research shows that they are suffering. So PwC found that least experienced workers stated that they needed the office most. In a study by Paramentis, 18 to 24-year-olds are least likely to prefer working at home. 89% of early career talent workers reported having difficulties working from home. 7 out of 10 said the office was important for learning and development, which is obviously critical at the beginning of a career. And 2/3 of employees say their career had been helped by relationships made in the office, which again becomes more tricky. Add to that the projection by the BMJ that, which is a real positive, that there's going to be even further reduction in mental health stigma, and it's very probable that our early career talent are going to be happier talking about their problems and likely to have more. Another point to make, I haven't got time to dive into it, but I think it's a really interesting and important thing to focus on in the future, is there's a real concern about the impact hybrid working will have on diversity and inclusion and different groups. So we already know that the young are more likely to be in flat shares in less ideal situations. That's one of the reasons we predict that 35-plus-year-olds are happier working from home. They're more likely to have better situations. From a socioeconomic perspective, you know, what is the difference going to be for people who have to work from home, who might have less ideal situations, and what's going to be the impact on the visibility of those who are in, potentially if they're able to afford living in cities and happier to be in offices versus those who don't come in. So I think those are going to be interesting things to think about as well. But hopefully that's given us an overview of the importance, both from the perspective of what we have to gain and what we have to lose if we don't get it right, and why it's so critical for our early career talent who have suffered both pre, during, and are likely to continue to have specific issues post. We're going to move on to think about what we do about it now for the rest of the session, and I'm delighted to be joined by Laura, who is going to share some of her experience over the last year and some of the things that she's been doing with the team at HSBC. Laura, thanks so much for joining.
No worries, Alison. Pleasure to be asked, actually. So I will try and not go off on tangents. You know what I'm like with this sort of stuff. I could talk about it all day. I think the challenges that we faced this year are probably similar to most on the conference, but I suppose if I was to bucket up into sort of 3 key areas, I'd probably say the fear of the unknown has been a big challenge for our graduates, our interns, our placement students, and thinking about sort of work experience and apprentices as well. It impacts everyone, doesn't it? But I think sort of the sort of unknown around about, will programs be going ahead? What formats are they going to take? When are we going to go back to the office? Probably the most asked question I had last year and continues to be this year. And probably for our graduates on programme, it's thinking ahead to like, what is the job landscape going to look like for us in the future? Because it maybe doesn't feel so great sort of now. And I think that's particularly prevalent for our early careers talent, because they've not quite learned all the skills yet to become sort of self-directed learners. They're maybe still used to the structures that they used to have in academia around about you're told what to do and when to do it and how to do it, and they're sort of having to navigate that a bit in the dark just now. So I think there's a big piece here around about having that growth mindset, sort of building your brand from scratch in a new company. So perhaps tapping into what sort of Tessa and Gary were talking about earlier about that lack of like psychological safety, really. So yeah, that's one of them. I'd say that the other challenge is probably similar to a lot of us, for the challenge of working from home, but probably much more pronounced for people that are maybe in challenging sort of physical environments, so maybe really busy family households perhaps, and working from their beds and things like that, to the grads that are maybe more isolated and they've come from other countries and they've relocated, or they're here by themselves living alone. That's particularly hard. I can really resonate with that because I live by myself, and I know that's had its ups and downs for me sort of over the past sort of 12 months. So I do think that sort of taps into the mental health piece. And I suppose for the grads and industrial placements and interns, it's sort of how do you deal with your emotions when you face a setback and you perhaps just don't have the immediate people around about you to like help have that chat and sort of just ask the question like, how are you, or like, are you okay, like how are you? So that's been a big challenge. And I saw Fabienne's point in the chat about sort of resilience sort of really looks towards sort of more the individual and sort of their responsibility, but I do believe there's a big part that we play in terms of helping our grads and things to develop those skills. And to coin Bob's phrase from yesterday, BC, we did do a development, well, 2 development days focused around about the topic of resilience in October 2019. And I thought, this is brilliant, we've got this nailed. We've taught them all that they need to know, but I think that the last 12 months have shown us all that what resilience actually is sort of living through that experience and having to deal with things. And then the last thing that I would say would be sort of one of our key challenges is around about the feelings of being robbed of their experiences. So not being in the office, it's not so easy to sort of learn from other people. It's not so easy to build your network. And I suppose those feelings of not being able to do enough or they're not being good enough taps into sort of some of the concepts that we've spoken about over the last couple of days around about imposter syndrome, and really that need to sort of try harder to achieve things. And even with the support networks that we've got in place, our grads and interns have really found that a challenge.
Yeah, no, thanks, Laura. That's really true. I mean, I hear it a lot, and a lot of research that shows that the imposter syndrome just, that voice gets louder when you're not kind of being able to talk to peers. And certainly it's something we've seen, like breakout rooms and Zoom, the huge value of people being able to just share their experience and realize that they're not alone, that other people feel the way they do, has been absolutely huge.
Definitely.
If you could share 1 or 2 tips, either based on what you think you guys have done well to support early career talent over the last year, or that you have planned for the forthcoming year, what would you say?
Wow, you're going to make me pick just 1 or 2.
Well, say a bunch. I'm sure everyone will be delighted to steal them all.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to talk about them all. So if anyone does want to know more, I'm more than happy to share. I will try and sort of maybe touch on things that are maybe a bit different from what we've heard from some of the other companies. So I think sort of communication is key. Even if you don't know any news, just tell them about it. That's what we heard from our grads that they wanted to know. So even if we don't know when we're going back to the office, just say we don't know, but how's everyone feeling, and sort of checking in with them. That's worked really well with us. I think particularly when stuff has hit the media. So like last year with the Black Lives Matter movement, last week with the Harry and Meghan interview with Sarah Everett and everything that sort of came out in the press there, it's sort of acknowledging that stuff's going on for people outside of work. So we quite often sort of drop emails to our grads just to check in. We share wellbeing resources just to remind them that those things are there to support them, reinforce that we have like one-to-one time and things available for them. That makes a huge difference. We've done quite a bit around about upskilling and building confidence of our managers. So we were able to move some of the budgets that we had last year for our in-person events and sort of invest that into training for our managers. And I suppose helping our managers understand what are the challenges in the early career space. So why do they struggle a bit more with their resilience and maybe other members of the team, how it's harder for them to start working remotely rather than that sort of transition piece from office to remote. And I suppose one of the big things that we focus on within our programs is around about the culture that the grads and the interns, that they feel a sense of belonging, sort of being able to be themselves at work. So like even some of the simple stuff that at our events or when we run some of our pre-boarding activity, we introduce ourselves with our pronouns. So I'm Laura, my pronouns are she and her. And we introduced that because we'd had some feedback with grads that sometimes it's hard to come out again at work. So people might have come out at university or through school or education, but at work sometimes people go back in and they aren't sort of comfortable being themselves. So we introduced simple things like that. We've now got a BAME Early Career Working Group, which was set up by a group of grads who just felt the need that there was more that they could do in the community around about promoting awareness around Black Lives Matter and all the other challenges that people of ethnic minority groups face. So last week we learned about code switching, which I would have never learned of before, and unless the sort of grads are like teaching us this stuff. So yeah, I think those things sort of make a big difference.
Brilliant.
And yeah.
Did you have one more?
I was trying to think sort of what else I would say. I think sort of the sense of community is the biggest thing. So our grads, interns, or IPs, they've said that the best sessions that they've had since being with us, like through their induction and things like that, has genuinely been the social side of things. So I heard some of our interns were up to 5 a.m. with some of their socials. I don't know quite how the interns from Singapore were quite managing it, to be honest. But they were telling us that sort of sense of getting to know other people and sort of just build connections. They didn't think they were going to do it as easily as they did, but I think a lot of that was down to them wanting to do it, and I suppose wanting to try even harder than they maybe had in the past.
I love that. I mean, I think humans are so clever, and we'll talk about it a bit more, but that need to feel connected is such a core part of our being, that if it's you know, taken away from us, we will find a way. You know, I think that's one of the things we've really loved and seen, is that people will make the most of the opportunities that they do have, and they'll value them more, because obviously the way that we connect has changed so much. So a virtual connection has that much more impact, because you're not sort of, you know, it's not compared to day in, day out face-to-face interactions. And yeah, I love the point about the managers and the importance of them. We know a lot about reducing empathy gap, so helping them to understand, you know, getting them to think more about actually, what does this feel like? Imagine you joined in this way, how different would it feel, is really, really smart. And in terms of creating psychological safety, yeah, anything where people set up platforms where they can talk about things that are hard to talk about helps the psychological safety of everyone. So there's research that shows, you know, all groups, even ones we might consider to not have anything to hide, have a degree to which they feel they have to hide certain aspects of their personality. And the more we can just create an environment where everyone feels they can be whoever they are, the better that is for all of us. So lovely examples, Laura, and thank you so much for sharing them. And Laura's going to stick around for Q&A, so if you've got any questions for Laura or on the presentation, please do pop them into the Q&A box and we will come on to them shortly. So Laura's masterclass in on the ground, and what we're going to do now is share some initial findings from robust analysis that we've been conducting into dozens of wellbeing models and peer-reviewed articles. There should be something flashy coming on now to show you some of them, which range from the NHS, Business in the Community, Centre for Healthy Minds, which was founded by Dr. Richard Davidson, to the University of Minnesota and beyond, and of course including self-determination theory, which DBL I'm incredibly passionate about, and DBL uses to underpin a lot of what we do, our core psychological needs, which Krisha talked about yesterday, of feeling competent, connected and autonomous. And from this analysis, we've come up with a mnemonic I love mnemonics because my favorite behavioral science principle is if you want people to do something, make it easy. And we've all got very complicated lives. So this is a mnemonic for what we need to do to support our grads. We need to support them to feel calm. And yes, I'm pleased that feeling calm sounds like a nice way to be in terms of well-being. But underpinning calm is that we need to make sure that our graduates have confidence, particularly around capability. They feel confident and capable in the areas that they're expected to be working on as they join and when they are within our organisations. We need to help them to feel comfortable with adaptability. And I'm going to come on to talk about more about what I mean by that, because it's not just about helping them to weather loads of storms, it's about how we reduce the ferocity of the storm. We need to help them to have links, and this is absolutely about connection, belonging, community, and how do we create the links that are so important to humans' core psychological needs. And finally, we need to help them to feel motivated. So research into well-being would suggest that if you can do these 4 things, you will be making massive inroads into improving the well-being and belonging of your early career talent. So expanding on that a bit more for the next 5 minutes or so, confidence. So what we know is that it's really important that early career talent feel that they are set up for success when they join an organisation. A core psychological need is to feel capable. I loved seeing that pre-boarding has been on the up over the last year, because I think one of the most powerful things we can and should be doing is helping our early career talent to feel confident before they join, being really cognizant and honest about the fact that joining an organisation in a remote context is terrifying, and just taking away as much of that fear and giving them as much confidence as we can. So I know from Gemma at Fidelity, lots of focus on how to set them up for success with tech, through to what kind of remote working skills are we worried about. We know self-management in a remote context is very challenging. We know that a lot of the things that have been particularly difficult are around communication, relationships, teamwork, etc. They've all become more challenging in a remote context, and they will continue to be possibly even more challenging in a hybrid context. How do you manage as an early career, as an intern or a grad or an apprentice, if you're in the office some days and your manager isn't, what are some of the parameters we need to put around that? What's going to be the impact of visibility? So really, really important to think about supporting them on remote work and hybrid work as we move forward. Belonging, there are some really powerful things we can do to help people to own their own belonging. Thinking about that point of autonomy, how can we actually make people think about how they lead their own belonging, make their own connections, build communities, and also what their role is in promoting psychological safety and belonging for others. So there's a lot of stuff about how important it is to spot when belonging and psychological well-being is going well and when it's not. And then finally, well-being, what are some of the strategies around resilience? I know they've asked for top tips on books. I think a really important book is Angela Duckworth's Grit, because I think what we're all having to do now is move beyond resilience into grit, which is kind of what happens when you have to be resilient over a very long time. And remote work, belonging and well-being has consistently been the 3 areas that when we've run pulse surveys with employers across the globe have been highlighted as the most important areas that we want to support our young talent. So we need to give them confidence in areas that they are concerned about being capable. And adaptability, so obviously a major theme, and one of the things we've been supporting partners for over the last year on is how do you help people cope with adaptability. There's lots of psychological tricks like reframing, focusing on what you can control. They're really, really powerful tools. And when I think about creating experiences and changing lives, I feel like giving the right tools to somebody who is really struggling, and a lot of people, a lot of early career talent have really struggled over the last year. That's when we can really change lives. We can give someone a tool to change how they're framing, viewing, experiencing a really difficult time. But another incredibly important thing is actually to remove as much uncertainty as we can. Laura talked about that a lot. I was giving a talk with Kimberly from BT the other day, and she talked about the fact that BT has just said, you are not going to come back into the office until 3 months after the government says that that's okay. So for students, knowing that they're not suddenly going to have to, I think Laura, you were saying, you were speaking to someone the other day, and knowing that they're not suddenly going to have to start paying their rent again is going to be a huge relief, things like that. So how do we reduce the uncertainty by telling them as much as we can? And that's to what Laura's point about, communications, much open communication, which also builds trust. highlight the areas that they do have autonomy. So one of the great things is working from home gives them lots of confidence about what they can and can't do. If you're relaxed about whether they go for a run in the middle of the day, you know, highlight some of the things that they've got autonomy over, and do sort of support them in building resilience around the ever-shifting sounds that we're all having to deal with. We've talked a lot about the importance of community and connection and making cohorts feel you know, connected, a sense of belonging. It's important to do that with their peers, with their cohort. It's important to do that with line managers. It's also brilliant to do it with executives and mentors. Again, thinking about this pandemic in a positive lens, we've potentially got access to mentors and to executives we might not have had before. When students are seeing senior members of an organisation, they might literally be in their room. That actually builds a stronger sense of connection, and that's been coming out in the research as well. So there are some real positives there. Let's just be really deliberate. One of the important things about connections and links in this remote and hybrid future is you have to be more deliberate about them, because they don't happen at the water cooler like they used to. And then the final thing is people feel a far greater sense of well-being when they're motivated. So purpose has been spoken about a lot. There are very deliberate strategies we should be putting in place to make sure that our early career talent feel a sense of purpose when they go to work, feel connected to the values of the organisation. People feel more greater sense of well-being when they feel they're performing well. There are very clear strategies around how we enhance people's performance. We all feel better when we're kind of in flow versus struggling. It links back to confidence and capability. How do we support them to have the best performance? And how do we link that to a passion for their career, passion for the future, passion for the organisation? And again, these are things that we can support the individual to do, but also we can support line managers and programme managers to help with. And I want to move on to questions now. So we've got just 10 minutes to do so, but these are just some of the skills that we've worked on over the last year. So we launched this suite a year ago in the face of the pandemic, skills both for the individual and for managers. So it's really, really important to have both. Remote networking being one of the major concerns about a year ago, and something that we've done a lot of work on. And then off the back of our research, which is ongoing, but we are developing support in areas like belonging. So how to help people feel autonomously empowered to own their own belonging, and how to help managers to support it. Like, how do we create cultures where psychological safety thrives and belonging is felt? And finally, some key skills for well-being, which again talks about the sorts of things like how do you feel motivated, how do you enhance your confidence, how do you create purpose, both for individuals and for managers. And some final recommendations, again, sort of screen snap moment, and you get them on the slide. So enhance well-being and belonging, produce commercial, personal and human benefits. Well-being's been an issue, BC, DC and AC. And psychological safety and behavioural science points to the need to support interns and graduates to have calm, confidence, adaptability, links and motivation. Over to Stephen and Laura coming back for any questions that you may have had. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Alison. Thanks for that, Laura. Lots of chat in the chat box, but also we've got some questions through, so I'll crack into those because we've got 8 minutes left. So top of the list on the questions was something about actually the stages going back into the office. So I'll read it out. A lot of organisations are putting plans in place to return to the office in occupancy stages, 10%, 25%, 50%, etc. So do you think that we should be impressing to decision makers that it should be early talent, people who should be prioritising this return to the office? Should they go back first?
Laura, do you have I always have a view.
We were actually talking about this last week with some of our grads, and I think potentially yes, but we have to be careful, because if we send all of our grads and interns back into the office and their teams aren't around them to support them, it's not going to be any good either. So I think it does need to be a bit more of a blended approach and really consider about how do you get that sort of balance right. Not sure we have the answers, but I wouldn't be sort of rushing to get them all back sort of immediately if their teams were still working from home.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think as it starts to unfold, it's going to be really important to think about how we support early career talent to go back in, but also when they have people around them who can support them. I've spoken to a number of organisations who find the challenge between not wanting to mandate specific days, but then equally it will be important for people to feel that their teams are there, that they're actually having access to the managers. It's not going to be so helpful if a manager's in on a Tuesday and you're in on a Thursday. So that's one issue I think does need probably quite deliberate planning and potentially firm recommendations or guidance on when we want people to be back in. The other thing is back to the diversity point. I think it's going to be, so CIPD is actually putting forward a movement to make the right to work flexibly a right. And I think there are going to be some people for whom it's really beneficial not to have to live in inexpensive cities, you know, poorer people coming from poorer backgrounds, lower social mobility, etc. And so then it's going to be quite challenging if lots of people are benefiting from being able to work from home more, but we're saying early career talent all have to be in. I think what's really important actually is that every organisation, and again this is a recommendation from CIPD and how to navigate the return to the office in a hybrid future, is to actually ask the question. So to poll, again, people like being asked, they'll feel more involved, to poll our early career talent who are coming in and just see what they want, what's going to work for them in their lives. I think that's key. But it's a nutty challenge.
Yes, it is. Which leads on to the next question actually I've got on my list, which is talking about generations. I think you've touched on this, and it's you know, is there a potential generation issue here where those more established in their careers, maybe more established in their personal lives, again, you know, don't live a bit further out the bigger commutes? Is there a challenge where actually some of those people actually have seen their well-being improve a bit more in lockdown, and it's a much more nuanced piece compared to, like we said, young people who may be sort of living in the city centres or still living at home, shared accommodation? I mean, I know one or two people who have left shared accommodation and come back home just because of the hassle of everybody sharing too small a space, and all the challenges that come with that. So any thoughts on the generation? Is there a generation divide? I hate to use that cliche.
Absolutely, the data completely shows it. So sort of as I mentioned, and I happily dig out the exact stats, but significantly more over 35-year-olds, 35 to 45-year-olds want to be at home more than in the office. Far fewer 18 to 24-year-olds want that balance. They want more percentage-wise, more time in the office. Interestingly, nearly no one seems to want 100, you know, to go back to the old model, as I said. So I think everybody enjoys some element of home working. But yeah, intuitively, if you've either sort of returned home or you're in a shared flat, you know, where it's challenging, I know some internet issues, etc. You know, you want less time there than if you sort of really feel that you're established and you're happy and comfortable. So yes, there are going to be, I think it is a real topic that we want to look at. There are going to be significant implications for different groups. Age will be one of them. Social background will be another, that we need to be really aware of.
Have you any thoughts, Laura? Is that something you guys are thinking about at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely of a different generation than most of my grads, for example. But I suppose the key for us is not to sort of group and generalise them. Sort of, you always have to think that they are individuals and things will differ for each of them. So listening to sort of that graduate voice, as we call it is critical for any decisions that you're going to make. So we always think of them as sort of they're our customer. Equally with the business or partnering with that, but yeah, if you're thinking about your experience, you need to think about what do they want. So yeah, definitely agree with that point, Alice.
And then we've had another question that's actually jumped to the top in terms of likes that people want asking. So, and that is, what does a high well-being workplace environment look like?
Oh, good question.
That's definitely one for you, Alice.
we probably need another hour. I mean, obviously the easy answer is one where everybody has calm. No, it's a really good question. I mean, I think as a quick and short answer is it's going to be about the culture. So what we've seen, the research from CIPD, is if you don't have the right culture, do whatever you like, spend all the money you like on a wellbeing program, it's not going to make any difference. So I think the fact that, you know, the correlation, and scientists will know there's a difference between correlation and causation, but they're so highly linked between belonging and well-being. It does nod to the fact that, you know, the focus that the conference has had, the number of talks that have talked about community, connection, psychological safety, it's critical. It's always been critical, and it's going to be even more so. So I think an easy answer is a high well-being workplace is somewhere where people feel a high level of psychological safety, where people feel purposeful, they feel and want to belong. You know, individuals will have variation in personal well-being, health, mental, etc. Our job is to create cultures and environments where whatever anyone's individual makeup is, individual circumstances are, we are responsible for making their well-being the best that it can possibly be, a net positive, not a net detractor. And we need to do that. Same with D&I. These are not easy fixes. We need to have cultures where people feel supported. I will give a little shout out to Laura, but her team has won the development award from NUE 2 years in a row because it feels like they are doing it for the right reasons, which is they really truly want to support their early career talent, and that's what we've got to do. We have to really truly want our people to feel well. It's got commercial benefits as well as human benefits. It's a no-brainer, and I think when organisations really galvanise behind how do we create a culture where people thrive, that's what a high wellbeing environment and organisation looks like.
We are on the time to stop. I wonder if we could just very quickly sneak a quick answer into this one, because I think it's quite an interesting question. And the question is saying the more optimistic amongst us have tried to get graduates to appreciate that these circumstances will have developed skills and experience that no others have had. And the question asked is, do you think that is fair? And actually, is there something positive that we can look at in terms of the situation, the experiences people have been through over the last 12 months?
I think it's two things. It's absolutely true, and also, given the power of framing, I think it's the only way that they should be looking at it. It is absolutely true. I mean, I think my resilience and patience has improved due to homeschooling, and that's one of the things that I try to tell myself every day about homeschooling. Like, when you are having a difficult time, try and frame it in what are the positives coming out of this. And it is absolutely true that I think we've moved beyond resilience to grit. I think we are having to find new levels of coping with uncertainty. These are things that we know are hugely important. So I absolutely agree that is something that they are all experiencing. And another positive thing actually that we found is for students, they're probably better set up to do this really than some people who've been at work for a long time. They're more tech enabled, and actually they've had to come from it. One of the things we know is when you move from the world of education into the world of work, your autonomy drops. Actually working from home, and that's kind of the point about framing the autonomy they have positively, actually working from home gives you more autonomy. So in a way, they're having an easier transition, and this hybrid future is arguably a better one. So I think there's lots of positives, and psychology would suggest that framing things in a positive light is always right. So yes, I agree, and keep doing it. And
Laura, last word to you. Do you agree with that as well?
Yeah, and I would sort of maybe even take it away from sort of our early talent populations and think about us as professionals that working in this industry or with this population. We've shown massive grit and resilience in the last year. We've overcome challenges that we never thought we'd have to overcome, and I think sort of we should be really proud of what we've achieved, and that we've been able to be creative and come out with probably even better solutions than maybe what we've done sort of historically in the past. So yeah, I definitely agree with it.
Fantastic. Right, we will have to end it there because I've gone over 2 minutes, and I know James and the production team will be pulling his hair out at the moment saying, shut up, stop talking. But really fascinating subject and a great session and lots of interaction. So Laura, Alice, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. And as I have said many a time, that actually the session, if you didn't quite catch all of it, you will be able to see it very shortly on catch up on the video. So thanks very much. Time for a 10 minutes break, back at 1 o'clock. Time to grab a quick sandwich because it's the lunch and learn session next. So talk to you all very soon.